Chapter 539, Late Night Operations. When an outsider picks up that holy sword, God will walk the land again. But what happens if the holy sword shatters? These two sentences echoed in the minds of Calat and Edmonton. The matter was completely in the gaps of their knowledge. For a few seconds, they stared at the shattered holy sword, their expressions dull while they remained speechless. They couldn't believe that the holy sword, which had only been touched by an outsider in the evening, had suddenly shattered. What does this mean? What does it represent? The two of them didn't dare to think too deeply about it. They felt as if they had returned to the very beginning. Back then, one of the secret bases of the resistance had been discovered by the lone military. They were raided without any warning, and this resulted in their fathers being killed in that massacre. Their female relatives were abducted and sold to different places. Before receiving the grievous news, the feelings Calat and Edmonton felt that day mirrored what they felt today. They felt heavy, confused, expectant, and unease, all of them mixing to form an intense pressure. Return to the forest, find the high priest, and figure out the reason. Perhaps this is the latest revelation from God. Calat turned his wheelchair and said in a deep voice. Edmonton immediately stood up, saying to his remaining subordinates, "Continue searching for those blasphemers, but do not stay here. Also, instruct the believers outside not to hold any rituals or even pray." The unexpected change in events made him extra vigilant. Bam, in the corner of the street, where the Cathedral of Waves was located. Holding a stack of white folded paper, Danitz turned his head to the side, feeling a mix of nervousness, worry, and puzzlement. "You mean that I'm to post them in different parts of the street, and finally post it on the main door of the Cathedral of Waves?" He was very afraid that the door of the cathedral would suddenly open, and a group of fist-brandishing priests and bishops would rush out, immediately attacking them without even asking why he had posted the poster. Klein maintained his coldness and said, "Yes." His original plan was to hand the matter of Sea God Calvatua over to Mr. Hanged Man, so that he could warn the Church of Storms. However, considering that he still held the secret of Banzi Harbor, and he might even have reported the matter, it would be easy for him to arouse suspicion with another piece of important information in such a short period of time. As for the solution, it was very simple. He could post a few posters on the mandated Punishers' front door so that they could see it as soon as they came out. There was a small problem with Klein's plan. He couldn't tell which of the shops around the Cathedral of Waves was the cover identity of the mandated Punishers. All he could do was make Danitz work a little harder and stick the posters everywhere in prominent spots, including, but not limited to, the front door of the Cathedral of Waves. "I should have run away earlier. Why would I think that this fellow had saved my life? Perhaps I would have been converted into gold pounds if he were any other powerful adventurer. No, who would have imagined that this lunatic would so easily resolve the sea god's curse? Fleeing might put me in an even worse state." While lamenting inwardly, Danitz unrolled the pile of white paper and casually glanced at the content. After Letitia Dolra and company entered and left the sea god's ruin in Saimim Island, they were pursued by the resistance. Meanwhile, Calat and the resistance were trying to sell a strange bone sword that looked a little bent. Sea god Calvatua's body is on the brink of collapse with an extremely deranged mental state. Danitz froze for 2 seconds, then he subconsciously glanced at Jayaman Sparrow. "I can understand the first few statements, but why is there a mention of sea god Calvatua being on the brink of collapse and in an extremely deranged mental state? How does Jayaman Sparrow know? Did he discover a problem when he was dealing with the sea god's curse? And how did he deal with the sea god's curse? The organization behind him is more powerful than I thought. Could it be that it's similar to the Aurora Order, in which they serve a real deity?" The more he thought about it, the more Danitz trembled in fear. The first time he heard of the Aurora Order had originated from a robbery at sea. Back then, it was the first time he saw his captain's serious expression. After that, he was taught some so-called general knowledge of the mysterious world. Klein responded to Danitz with an emotionless gaze. In the poster, he had eliminated any subjective assumptions, and he had only described the matters that could be confirmed with certainty, so as to not interfere with the judgment of the higher-ups in the Church of Storms. Among them, the content regarding an important item that Letitia and company had taken away was excluded. The lost temple was changed to a broader and more inclusive sea god ruin. The base was obviously abandoned by Kalet and the others after realizing that something had happened to the sea god, so it was also left unmentioned. Danitz suddenly retracted his gaze, afraid to look any further. Captain said that the more secrets someone has, the more dangerous they are. He thought for a while and worriedly said, "If we stick it on the front door of the cathedral, it will definitely garner immense attention from the Church of Storms. Will they discover that I was the one who did it?" Klein gave a terse answer. "Yes." Danitz forced a smile and said, "Then wouldn't I be in grave danger?" Klein used his clown ability to control his expression and calmly replied, "You were already a pirate who has a bounty for your head. Do you think you can swagger down the main streets of Bayam now?" Klein lampooned inwardly. "That's true, no matter what, they will still capture me and claim my bounty. No, there's something wrong with that." Danitz blurted out, "But my bounty will increase." Klein looked at him, but he didn't say anything. All he did was grin a little. For a moment, Danitz thought he heard a rhetorical question. "Isn't this a good thing?" "A good thing for a donkey to kick." With a dry chuckle, Danitz took the pile of posters, and taking advantage of the heavy winds and late night, posted them in prominent spot on the street near the Cathedral of Waves. "It really looks like posting a small advertisement." Klein, who had one hand in his pocket, observed from afar and commented inwardly. He sighed and thought, "It's good to have an assistant. At least, I don't have to do something that tarnishes my reputation. If I were in Tingen or Backland, if something like that had happened, the scene was too beautiful to imagine." Danitz finally reached outside the Cathedral of Waves, plastered the poster on the front door, clenched his fist, and pounded on the door. After finishing all of this, he turned around and ran, as if there were 10 mandated punishers running after him from behind. Klein didn't dare to be negligent. He pulled out a paper figurine, shook it off, and burned it to ashes before briskly walking to another street. After his recent encounters with the mandated punishers, he had a deep understanding of their style, and he didn't dare to be the slightest bit careless. It was only when they were far away from the Cathedral of Waves that they slowed down and regained their normal walking speed. Danitz had a good constitution. His face wasn't flushed, nor was he panting. He was slightly puzzled and asked, "Why didn't you just write to the police or throw it in the Governor General's office?" Before Klein could reply, he had already realized why. That's right, the lower-ranking police and the staff of the Governor General's office are locals. They might very well pity the resistance or might be clandestine believers of Sea God. As they were talking, they turned a corner and saw an extremely large red building in front of them. The inside was brightly lit, and music could be heard from within. People and carriages streamed in and out the door. It didn't exude any vibes that it was late at night. We actually ended up walking here." After a second of hesitation, a smile appeared on Danitz's face, a smile that all men understood. "Red Theater." Klein, who was rich in theoretical knowledge, suddenly came to a realization. Danitz laughed mischievously. "This is one of the most famous places in the entire Sanya Sea. There are mysterious and flirtatious Balam girls, passionate Fainapotter girls, open and alluring Intis maidens, tall and graceful Fasak ladies, conservative and quiet lone women, gentle and docile natives. This fellow knows a lot, he comes often." Klein swept a glance at Blazing and said nothing. For some reason, Danitz felt as though he had been seen through, and he immediately laughed awkwardly. "This is what pirates talk about when bragging. I've only been here a few times. I didn't have much money in the past. I could only find some average ones, and it's mainly in the area of the Fog Sea. Afterward, I joined the Golden Dream." No wonder. Although Vice Admiral Iceberg's men receive quite good employment perks and often get to share in the treasure, it's still quite difficult to save up a few houses in Bayam. Compared to the typical pirate, this guy at least knows temperance and saves his money. Klein thought in enlightenment. Danitz didn't wish to continue on the topic, as he changed the topic. "There are a lot of street girls in Bayam, especially there." He pointed into the distance and said, There was once a pirate who did an experiment. He randomly knocked on a family's door, produced some money, and requested to do it with the mistress once. In the end, 3 to 4 families out of the 10 agreed. Tusk, if it's someone like you, who has the standard lone look, almost no one will refuse you. They might secretly hide their daughters to prevent you from discovering her. Ha ha ha, Lone's Navy would commit many murders and rapes here every year. They aren't any better than the pirates, but they would only be sent back to the country and pay some small fines. Klein listened quietly, and he suddenly thought back to the evening when the believers of the sea god were praying around the pool. He thought back to their feverish and numb faces. Backland, within the Odera family's villa. Emlyn White, who had taken the initiative to expose certain problems about himself, nervously followed Cosme underground. He once again arrived in the gray stone hall where the black iron coffin was kept. "Esteemed Lord Nibs, why have you summoned me?" Although Emlyn had rehearsed this scene in his mind dozens of times, he still couldn't completely remove the tension and apprehension in his heart. In this state, he suddenly understood a problem. From the viewpoint of theater studies, the role he was acting as should hide his worries and fears. "There's no need for any special concealment. I did well." Emlyn was suddenly much calmer. A deep, aged voice sounded from the coffin that was covered with symbols and magic labels. "To reward you. For the ancestor, you risked your life to pray to the fool. Although you didn't receive a response, you bore an enormous risk. This is an act that needs to be rewarded. Here is an acceptance draft for £7,000, a reward for you. I didn't give it to you in a timely fashion due to the great smog of Backland, but it's never too late. At the same time, you must always be aware of yourself and not relax. If anything abnormal happens, immediately inform Cosme." He really gave me money. Emlyn almost forgot to close his mouth.